Hang on. I think before we go any further, I think we need to have Jim start and read the disclaimers and kick off the official gathering. And then he'll hand off to me, and we're going to have a little conversation. I'll let you know kind of what we got planned for this hour, and then we'll go from there. And again, it's going to be similar to last time. It's really not a program as much as it's a conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
So with that, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. We do have a little bit of housekeeping here we have to do. We want to welcome you all to number 2 in a 3-part series on the history of Minnesota brass. As Kurt said, it's more a conversation than a lecture series. But anyway, it's a great opportunity to make up for lost time over the past year. Today, we're going to be talking about the late 70s into the early 90s. So a lot of ground to cover there. But we also want to tell you about some other programs that we're working on. There is an MBI Education Academy that offers lessons to members who would like to increase their musical and/or performance skills. You can tell I'm reading this. They're offering 30-minute virtual lessons at no cost to the student, and the classes are taught by the MBI staff and alumni. And then we're also going to have a social hour, and I don't know the dates for that have been set, but it's going to be even more wide-ranging than these are, and people will just sit around and shoot the bull and enjoy each other's company and tell great stories. We have to note the activities are made possible through the Minnesota voters through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Yeah, and that comes out of our taxes. So we thank them, and those of you who pay your taxes in a timely and complete manner for making this operation possible. Thanks for signing on with us. This usually lasts about an hour, and we'll just have some good time. So Kurt, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. I'm Kurt. They call me Flash. I got a bunch of old t-shirts back here from this era. Like I say, a few of you are more familiar with the early 80s, the lean years. Like Jim said, we kind of ended up in the late 70s at the last meeting. The Corps was doing pretty well in 77 and 78 with good solid horn line, still trying to find our niche with our drum line at that point. 79 was a little bit of a step back. There's Scotty. Welcome, Scotty.
I made it, Scotty.
Scotty's going to help us with toward the second half hour and fill in at the front end as we have a conversation here. So my deal is after 79, of course, I went to lacrosse and marched the Blue Stars, and I went to college until 86. So I was not around during that period. And that was a period where the Corps didn't go to DCA, right? They went to ICA, and they did some other things. I know, and that was also the birth of DCM, I believe. And Paul's able to. I'm sorry?
What is ICA?
I couldn't even tell you what it stands for. I'd have to look in my Bible.
It was a championship. They ran a circuit. It was in basically upstate New York. Okay. And it was Vince Brody was who ran then the Rochester Crusaders, was very big in that. And he eventually started the Empire Statesmen. But it was something to base because DCA really wasn't around that much. I mean, everything started to come together, and there was ICA, which is basically, I used to call it for the freshwater corps, and then DCA started for all the saltwater corps.
Thank you.
And correction on the start of DCM. DCM was around back when I was in Riverman between 78 and 82.
But no senior corps. The first senior corps to perform at DeKalb was,
gotcha.
1980. And then the first year that senior corps were allowed to have shows and then compete in the championship was 81.
Noted.
Right, that was my bad for not being clear on that. So the one thing we did see in the 80s, what got us out of those lean years, what I recognize, two main things happened from a recruitment standpoint. One of those was the Rivermen ended up folding in the middle of the year. Were you part of that group, Kathy? And And if I recall correctly, didn't a group of Rivermen show up at rehearsal like in 85 or something?
Oh, correction. I marched through 82, but I think Greg Hilliard might have come from that group who went right from the close of rehearsal for Rivermen and busted ass over to Minnesota Brass's rehearsal, right, Greg?
I was at Riverman's last rehearsal, but I didn't join brass till 87.
Is that when you passed out?
And
You need to switch internets.
hold on.
And then the other huge recruiting thing that happened in the mid 80s was the beginning, the early establishment of our relationship with the University of Minnesota. Because wasn't it the mid or late 80s when we started to see UMN people show up, Stephanie and Jill, and I thought Greg was part of that
Cindy
group.
Bach.
Kathy Nieders and Becky Rucker were really, and Roger Grupp were really instrumental in starting that whole recruiting from the U.
And what year was that? Was that 86,
Becky-
87, 88?
Becky joined in 86 and then I joined
Yeah.
in 87, which Greg, did you say you joined that year too?
The U band people primarily started showing up in the early 80s. Tom Jones and Cat Leaders and them
Yes.
started coming in about 83, 84. About the same time we were starting to go out east with the
Yep, and they kept talking about what a great time they were having, so we had to come down.
Good. Which brings us to 86. 86 became a very pivotal year for this organization because it was the first year we made finals. And we played Sesame Street, and it was so unique. And I believe that was Andy Clausen's first drill. Is that correct?
He
So
did
he-
half and Mike Gordonier did the other half.
Okay. And we just wowed the crowd. I mean, we were in somewhat disbelief, I think, that we made finals because we never thought we'd ever made finals. And I think it was a few years after that that Chafee and I were having a conversation and said, I think he calls me out on it. We started counting down. I said, before my career is over, we're going to beat every single DCA corps and I'm going to win a world championship.
I did say that. And you held me to it too.
and that's for the next show. And then we went into that 9/11 phase in 86. We made finals 87. I thought we went out there with a better corps in pouring rain.
Oh, yeah.
B. Yeager shaking her hat and watching all the rain coming off it. The poor color guard with these 3-ton flags trying to spin in that weather. And I think we've all seen
You
that
guys
show.
had to move around. I didn't get to move. I had to stand in the corner of the end zone and get dumped on.
Scotty's muted. He'd like to share something there.
Don't touch anything.
Patty, if you're, I think you're muted, but there should be a unmute button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. It'll look like a microphone. There you go. Perfect.
Hey, all right. I was saying that, yeah, the field was nothing but rust. It was like a farmer's plow,
Right.
Yeah, and it was raining on top of that. People were tripping all over each other, and it was a mess. It was a mess. With a good core.
So we came out of 87. I'm getting close to handing off to Paul here. We came out of 87 not realizing that it wasn't just the disappointment of our placement, but we were beginning to find out that the financial state of this drum corps was in jeopardy, and the future of this drum corps was in jeopardy. And I'm going to kind of let Paul take it from there. They had a meeting. He was telling me earlier there was a meeting, and there was 3 or 4 options. And I'm gonna let Paul go from here on this one.
Hi, everyone. I had just moved to the Twin Cities and in late 87, and Skip Olson, someone I knew from being in management with 76 and having marched 1 year with brass, called me, he says, Chafee, you need to come to this meeting. It may look like they're gonna fold Minnesota Brass. And what they found out, and Gavin can also adjust to this, is that the Corps just kept incurring debt. 86, 87, I may have gone all the way back to 85. And it's not so much the director's fault from back then. I wish Jeff Burnham was on right now. Back in the 70s, nonprofit groups, if you were a youth group, everything was fine. But if you were a senior group or an adult group, you weren't allowed to have a tax exempt number. You paid state sales tax. And you also basically had to end the year with nothing. Whatever money in that you earned that year, you were supposed to spend. And so, you know, for years, Minnesota Brass went from January 1st to December 31st, did what they could with what money they had. And it's a miracle that the Corps survived. And then the Corps found a way to start generating money. The state of Minnesota also liked people starting to run bingo and pull tabs. And next thing you know, they just left whatever groups were alone that were giving them money via, you know, bingo and pull tabs. And with most organizations, the staff thinks one way, the members think another way, and the board thinks another way, but no one wants to sit there and figure out what does it cost. And if you can find someone to do that for you, that's great. And Minnesota Brass had people who didn't really give them the right information. You know, I'm maybe a little ashamed of Minnesota Brass for not following through, but those directors, that wasn't what they thrived at. They wanted to run a drum corps. Brass had talent, Brass had people, you know, and the next thing you know, we were in trouble with the state, not once, but twice. And at Skip Olson, that same guy was, his mother called him to let him know that they're going to lose their license. So I show up to this meeting for the 88 season, and you could just tell the board was just befuddled. They had no options. You know, I mean, we owed everyone money. I mean, Lee Lines, we owed the Star of Indiana. Staff has not been paid. Later we find out it was just a mess. How Gavin, you know, Alvarez did every time here, this person gave me a bill. That's all that guy did. He literally built our IOU. We owe you and that. And then we systematically went after it, but it was not pretty. So the meeting, the board had decided on 3 options. And their first option was, because, you know, some people want to still be competitive, we'll charge the Corps members X amount of money and we'll do a full competitive season. The second option was, we'll just do parades. And the third option was, we'll just take a year off. And that was the one the board wanted. And so I then stood up and I gave one of my famous babbling speeches, but I listed all these different corps that were going to take 1 year off. Just in the Midwest, that all folded, never came back. And then I mentioned to everyone, Minnesota Brass didn't have to be one of them. And for the reason that all those corps that folded because they're going to take a year off had 2 problems. One, they were broke, and second, they had no members. Brass wasn't in that situation. Brass had a corps. You had loyal, talented members, but you didn't have money. You had, you know, you had a way to earn money. You just had to straighten it out.
So the compromise was?
I said, what you should do is field a corps, stick with Drum Corps Midwest, because at least you get paid. You can run your season through DeKalb. And for the kids who are, you know, could still march with junior corps, cut them loose and pick up slots with the corps that needed people. And if you had to, see if you could pick up a couple parades. And then everyone's like, you know, they're all starting to go back and forth. And finally, believe it or not, I think it was Joel, one of the Matuzaks, I think he was only like 16. He goes, I want to vote on that. And everyone's going nuts. And I stood up, I said, Robert's Rules of Order. It's real simple. Someone has to make a motion. Another person has to second it. Then we can discuss my proposal. And if they want, they can vote on it. And so then I proposed that. Several people yelled second. And we discussed it, and the membership voted to do it that way.
Who all marched in 88? Anybody here march 88? I did.
That was a,
Off the Line, The Natural. I think that was Tom Jones' first solo, I believe.
That was my rookie year.
Whose
88?
rookie year?
88 was my rookie
You?
year. Yep.
Yeah, that was a nice, easy year. And then the second half of the year, we like Paul said, we lost members. We were a little bit smaller. I remember going up to Uper or something in August for a little show and got beat by the Blue Stars because we only had like a half a core. But we stayed on the field. We established our consecutivity, and then that brought us to what Paul came, we did a pre-production meeting earlier today. Paul calls 89, 90, and 91 the most pivotal years that this drum corps, in this drum corps history. It's those 3 years that we went from not even being able to afford to go out east to beginning in 91, the longest consecutive finalist streak of any DCA corps other than the Hawthorne Caballeros. Wow. That happened in those 3 years. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to let him continue.
Well, so 89's coming around. And for those of you who don't know, I married a Ruckert. And at the time, that family did a lot for brass. To say that over the years, I would tell the Ruckerts that I thought brass wasn't running right. I was not liked. I was a Packer fan. I was a Chiefs. I mean, there's nothing that they liked about me. I still don't know why Pat said yes, but 41 years later or whatever, she's still there. So then I get a call from Rob Ruckert, and he calls me, he says, Paul, I listened to you all those years and didn't agree with you. And now I think you should run for corps director. And his wife then was Christy, was it then?
Yeah.
Yes.
And Christy's the same way. And I'm looking at these people and I'm like, I don't think you guys are ready for that. You don't understand this, And so, and then I says, well, I need to look at the books. And next thing you know, without asking the board, hey, it's okay. You can, but they provide me with the finances for the corps. And the only color I saw was red. And I could understand. And then I really understood what the poor board went through in 88. They were just trying not to lose money. The famous line Gavin taught me I think he started it in 89 was the corps can no longer absorb any future debt. I used to say we just don't lose money, but he was real blunt. No future debt. And that was how we approached it. So then I went to the board meeting and I did have, quote, what I thought were a couple friends in the corps. And, and I noticed one thing about brass, they all got together. Back then, there were so many different couples that got married when they were with Minnesota Brass. I met my wife through Minnesota Brass. How many people here?
We got a couple here.
It was phenomenal. A lot of people met their spouse in brass. And so I'm sitting there going, and they're talking about, it could still fold. And I'm getting this phone call from the different people. Are you going to run or not? And then, I just moved up there to do another job. And then my wife steps in and she says, you cannot let the corps fold. And so I says, fine, I'll run for corps director. And she looked me straight in the eye and says, you will not fail at this. I was petrified. You guys may think I'm telling you don't cross your wife. I learned that lesson the hard way.
So Paul told me earlier, the two huge things he did was, I'm not going to mess with the creative stuff. I'm going to find somebody to handle all the creative stuff because his time was going to be focused on the financial piece and establishing those business relationships. And that's where where you brought Scotty in, right?
And it was kind of nice as I knew Scotty. He was from Chicago. We had mutual friends, Art Kirk.
Yeah, Paul did good.
And so, I ran. And when I ran, all these people asked me, well, what do you think about this? And I basically upset the whole board when I said, I'm joining this organization with very few friends, and I plan on leaving this organization with very few friends. I said, I'm not here to
They may or may not be the same people, but
I said, you don't need someone that's going to be your friend, and they didn't like that. And then someone made the point.
The Tommy Lee story, you got to tell that one too.
they made the point that, you know, he's a real bleep, bleep, bleep. And someone said, yeah, but he's our bleep, bleep, bleep. And that may be just what the Corps needs. And so I basically won the directorship by default because reports I didn't even think showed up for this presentation. So then I go to the first board meeting, you know, and I'm already putting together a budget from what I can figure out from the gambling and all that stuff. Gavin was still in college at the time, right, Gavin? If I remember the beginning of the '89 season, right?
He gave you a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm old. I can't see that far without magnifying glass.
Graduated in the spring of '88.
Oh, okay. Well, I know. And so then I go to the board meeting, and Tom Jones is the director of the board. And the first thing they sit down, they want to talk about what bills they're going to pay. And I looked at him and says, you guys have no control over that. We're not doing that. And what do you mean we're not doing that? I said, here's my tentative budget. Your job is to look at it, go over it, ask if you think I should make any changes, and approve it. And then you run the actuals against the budget. That's your job. And that didn't go over well. And to Tom Jones's credit, he didn't like it, but he said, you know, that's the way it's supposed to be. And I guess that's the way we're going to do it. And I had a lot of respect for Tom Jones because he did not, I don't think he cared much for me back then. And he backed me.
What do you mean then?
Yeah. Well, you know, and so, you know, and that's how it started. And I knew a lot about Wisconsin gambling laws. And that's the first thing I did was to get a copy of all the laws. And then I met the people who were involved with it. And then it basically boiled down to Gavin, myself, Shirley, and Al Jensen. We met every month and went over all this stuff, and we mastered it. I didn't know that you could pay people to work your bingo. In Wisconsin, you had to donate your time. And then we're sitting there going through this. We have 24 people we're paying to run bingo.
Al Jensen could write these bingo reports. I will never forget. To promote Americanism and patriotism in our community is the justification he would constantly use when he's filling out these forms, these state forms, very dry, and he hand wrote every one of them.
Yeah, and so, you know, I finally got a handle of it. Well, a lot of people didn't want me anywhere near the creative end. And I pulled Scotty aside and I said, Scotty, I can't do this. I'm not liked by a few people. They don't like that I came from 76, and I don't have time for it. And so, you know, I says, all I ask you to do is keep me in the loop. If I don't like something, you have to justify it to me, and I will back you with the Corps. But you need to get the staff, the show, and all that put together. And the only time I attended a staff meeting was early on when I went there to tell them that, because I had to leave because I had to go to bingo. And Gavin and myself especially, we went to bingos. We worked the bingos. We knew the state laws better than the people at the state. And that was how we finally start to get control of that. And then, so we finally had a plan, and then I had to go around and meet people that we owed money to. And it wasn't pleasant for the Corps. You know, I had to go to Jim Mason and talk to him at my first Drum Corps with Midwest meeting. You know, the 2 years before that, brass hid from him. We owed Star of Indiana money. That was not a fun meeting to go to. And I told Gavin my plan, and Gavin kind of liked it. I said, we'll just make payment plans with everyone. And I offered Star of Indiana $50 a month. And I went there with a printed out budget. I said, that's all I have left. And then we did that. I went to Lee Lines. I called to see Lee Lines because we owed them a ton of money. And he said, Tommy Lee said, yeah, I'll see you. And I went and saw him on a Thursday. And he was glad I came to talk to him and all that. And he went on his desk and handed me the paperwork that he was going to file that neck on Friday to go after the Corps for the money they owed him. So it was really kind of.
But you were able to work out a deal at that.
Yeah, and I said, and I told him, we will pay you this much every month. I said, you know, we got a treasurer who is definitely going to knows what to do, and we're going to work on this. And we definitely get payments from Drum Corps Midwest. So that means you'll get paid for any future uses of your buses. And if we ever make if we make more than what the budget says, we'll send you extra. And after about 4 months or whatever, we had a really good month with bingo, and we sent Lee Lines extra money. And I get a phone call from Tommy going, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I told you, if we make extra money, you're the first person that gets part of it." And I think that solidified it. And Tommy worked with us. Gavin made a very creative deal with him in '91 on how we could eliminate the debt and use it for us to change. But we finally took control of our ability to generate revenue. And that was the biggest thing I cared about.
So during that same time, now that we have Scotty back, if Scotty can unmute, during that same time, we also made that creative transition. And I'd like Scotty to help us a little bit with what memories he has from those late 80s there when he started working with Paul on the creative aspect.
You're gonna have to unmute again. So do you remember where you clicked the button last time?
Yeah,
There you go, perfect.
Okay, all right. Are we okay, Emily?
Yeah, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yeah, what kind of staff? What kind of staffing did we have as we made it through 88 and 89? We returned to finals.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time, I don't know, it was until I became director that I released Andy of his job and hired Doug Tholo. And Doug wrote our show for maybe a couple of years. I'm losing track at the times and all that stuff. I'm not very good at keeping track of things like that. But Paul's right. I think once we reach the plateau or the cornerstone of fundraising, that's when the Corps really started to improve. It was difficult taking that Corps out east and competing against these guys that compete with each other every weekend with the same judges. And it's tough for us to go out there and try to do that, but we continued to do it. But at the same time, it costs money to do that. And Gavin did his best to book, hotels and book spaces. One of the funny things, Gav, can you remember when the time you booked the place that it was Castles or something like that? It was
the railroad cars,
the trains.
Was it railroad cars? Yeah.
Yeah.
What a good deal with that.
That was 1994.
Yeah.
Oh, that was later. Okay.
Yeah. Well, because I was there. It was 1990. I think it was 94.
Oh my God! How can you remember the year?
93.
How can you remember the year?
That's awesome.
Happy haircut, you guys, man. Yeah, and so as far as Doug writing the show, he was he was part of the crew that came over from Madison Scouts and the alignment we had with that Corps in terms of drawing people from junior corps. It was mostly Madison with all the people we know and love. But
so then we returned to finals in 89.
Yeah.
With a very quality and competitive drum corps.
That's right.
And then 90, which next to 2011 is tied as my favorite year in this organization. 55 horns. We've got financial stability. And we had an exciting season. Is that the year we beat the Troopers?
No, 89 was.
89. I mean, we were beating DCI finalist corps in captions. We were beating them in some GE captions. We were beating them in some horn captions.
I remember that.
And Paul, Paul's corps director, and we all know what happened when we went out east that year, right? We had that show the night before finals. I don't know if that was Reading or Harrisburg or where it was.
Reading.
And
Reading.
Was it Reading?
Reading.
And several other corps managers, or I remember one corps manager came down to just tell us, oh my God, you guys are a top 6 corps. Oh my God, how did you pull this off? And then we know what happened the next day. We ended up finishing 11th.
Armband.
So Paul made an executive decision for a uniform modification that we were eventually told it was a $500 fine if you modify your uniform. And Paul, of course, is like, well, we're not in finals, so what difference does it make? How can you fine us if we're not even like in the show? You want to share some of that?
Well, I like to apologize for everyone in the Minnesota Brass. That was a situation where I did not know all the rules. And some stuff happened that I should have been able to attend the meeting on, and I was not in there. And that was the last time I ever dealt with DCA that I did not know all the rules. I would carry the bylaws with me. They all said sets of rules. And to this day, it's probably my most,
what he's getting at is he went to we talked about this earlier. He went to the finals meeting, the show meeting.
and they wouldn't let me in.
They wouldn't let him in the door because since he wasn't top 10, they said, you're no longer a member. Even though technically the bylaws say you're a member until the beginning of the new season, in September when they start their new course season.
And let's just say
they did let him in the meeting, so he didn't know what the rules were. So
yeah. And then let's just say they had a meeting about something that happened during prelims, that's as far as I'll go. That's ancient history, and I to this day blame myself for that. But the Corps in 89 and 90, things, finances, we just didn't make it. And having dealt with DCA since 1974, normally when people didn't get what they wanted, they were just rude, disrespectful, did things that they would get fined. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do it. And I'm thinking, well, that whole year everything was number 9 because we took 9th in 89. And so I thought, well, we'll make black armbands, and I went out and bought the material and the pins, and we bought white tape, and we made the 11s. And then
I remember Gwen pinning on my armband, and then somebody behind her had the tape putting the 11s on, and as we're at the gate.
And so I'm there, and and I always got dressed up for finals. That was one thing I did with Drum Corps Midwest. When I was with brass, I went out there in a suit. I never understood these other directors. If the Corps members can't even drink something in uniform because they have to look a certain way, and you walk out there with reject sweatpants and a holy t-shirt to represent your organization in front of the largest crowd in the Midwest, I didn't get it. I just didn't understand that. What a secondary standard here, you're supposed to run the group and you look like a reject from State Street in Madison? Come on. So I'm back there, and I had a double-breasted suit on, and I had my black armband. And I made a point of walking all the way up to the front, said hi to everyone, turned around, walked all the way back. And
he was kind of doing this a little bit as he walked by.
and people were looking. When I got there, I stood like that so they could see the number 11. I didn't care. What were they going to do to me? We weren't in finals. And then Candy was the secretary at the time. And next thing you know, Mickey Patron sends Candy. So then I'm talking to the guys working the back gate. Next thing you know, Candy comes up and he says, Paul, you got to take the black armband off. I says, no. And she goes, yeah, you can't. I mean, I go, what did I do wrong? Did I swear at anyone? Did we destroy our hotel? Did we slash tires? No. We took 11th and we're wearing an armband to show it. And she goes, well, I'm very disappointed in you. I says, fine. And then next, Mickey Patron comes up to me and tells me it's a $500 fine for that. And I looked at him and went, fine.
So then we get out to the show and Ron does his spiel. Now, have we all watched the video? You've all watched the video. Ron does his spiel, and and it's cut out. They actually cut his speech out.
Can't hear it.
Right. And right at the end, the volume comes back up and he says, so we're here for you, the paying customers, to perform for you tonight. And then you very subtly, you hear, that's $1,000 now. That's Mickey Patron standing it's on that video. And if you haven't heard it, you watch that again at the end of Ron's speech, you hear Mickey Patron say, that's $1,000 now.
And what was kind of nice about that, it actually did start to change perception at DCA, because I then was talking to Vince Bruni, and Vince was just so upset that they didn't win. And he had all these guys that used to be with him with the Rochester Crusaders and all these old drum corps guys. And there was like 15 people there, and Vince is just ranting and raving. And he goes, what a travesty. And the group looked at him and says, the worst travesty was what they did to that corps from Minnesota. How can you not have had them in the upper echelon and you put them 11? And Vince was like, but we didn't win. He goes, Vince, be quiet. And so then when I went to the next meeting, you know, it changed. People started to actually respect us. And then we went out there in 91 and, you know, and it started. But
so as we talk about 91 and we've had a great conversation here, but we're last 20 minutes. Something happened in 91 that goes along with what Ron talked about earlier at the beginning before the show even started about a significant change. You know, we had a horn line, we had a color guard, but the drum line was something that was fighting on their own to try to be successful. And at some point, and it was 91, right?
Yeah.
At some point, Paul went to the
Madison Scouts,
the drummers, and went,
Who do you want?
Who do you want? And they went, well, we'll take Chris Thompson. He's at Madison. And he goes, all right, I'll do that. And they go, yeah, right. You know, thanks for playing.
It was the one, it was a hard year for me in 91 because Scotty had switched jobs. If I remember, Scotty, you took a year off. You weren't the show coordinating staff because you had moved on and that, but you still, you know, you answered questions then. And Dick Beulah was the show coordinator. And I was tired of the drum line. I mean, they would come up to me, you know, what do you want? And they said, Chris Thompson. So I called Scott Stewart. And I said, Scott, I want to know if I can talk to one of your employees. And he's going, oh, I says, Chris Thompson. He says, well, yeah, you can do it. I says, no, it doesn't work that way. It's a business deal. You employ him right now. And if you want him, he goes to you. I understand that. I just want you to know that I would like to use him also. And I will never contest him going to Madison over Minnesota Brass. Is that do you understand that? No, you don't have to do that. I says, trust me, if he comes to us instead of one of your practices, our relationship's going right down the tubes. And Scott agreed, yeah, probably would. So then I called Chris Thompson and introduced myself and all that. He goes, well, I like Minnesota Brass. Got a bunch of people, friends up there. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool deal. You know, I'm sitting there going, this can't be this easy. And I told him I had talked to Stewart and all that. And so then I told him we practice Wednesday nights and all that. And he told me, well, I can come up this Wednesday. So then I tell the drummers that we're going to have a practice. And they go, who's coming? I says, well, Chris Thompson. None of them, I don't think they believe me. And then I made sure they had, I told everyone that the drums were rehearsing this Wednesday. It wasn't a full corps rehearsal. It was just a drum rehearsal, something we had never done. And, you know, Chris comes to my house and my wife and I are horn players. And Chris Thompson could not stop drumming on every square inch of my house. You know, I can remember he ate spaghetti. He goes, hey, thanks. I like spaghetti.
I just want to point out that Chris Thompson slept on my couch many times early in the 91 season.
Thank you. Because he always told me I got this taken care of. I obviously didn't want to stay at my house. So very few people, I was the only one who ever really wanted to stay there. But so then, you know, I drive them and next thing you know, I'm told to go, they gave me the school. I don't think we ever used this school. So I drive.
What school was that, Ron? Do you know what that school might have been?
The school where we rehearsed?
The first time he showed up.
Yeah, that was at Northeast Junior High. Is that right?
You're looking at me.
Oh, Northeast. Wow.
I remember going there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
get
where it
there.
was.
Yeah, and so I don't even know where to go. You know, I'm looking like a real qualified corps director, and drive up. We park, and there's a door open, and someone, I can't remember what says, "Oh, Paul, they're right up. Go up the steps and all that." So I go walking in, and I walk in, and then Chris comes behind me, and the next thing, all the drummers looked and went whoop, and instantly I think it was 6 snares standing at attention. There were 4 tenors, and was it 5 bass drums around or 4? 5. It was 6, 4, 5, wasn't it?
I think we had 5 at that time.
And they're just standing there, and I'm shell shocked. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Just because once they saw Chris, they all knew who he was.
Here's Chris, and it was like the only time I actually got involved with the staff, and it was like, I'm hiring this guy, and it was just something. And the next thing you know, Chris, goes around and he goes, "You're gonna do this." He took someone's sticks and he goes, "Dat, dat, 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 dat." He goes, "That's 8s and 8s," and he hands the sticks back to the guy. He goes, 1, 2, and then when they went to put their stick, you do it together. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be something to watch. And then he started it again the second time. Snares all hit the thing, and they start drumming. And as they're doing 8s and 8s, he went up to every individual snare and changed how they're holding the stick. Till, as Chris Thompson explained to me, the snare has the sticks has that little oblong thing at the end. You want that whole thing to strike straight down on the head to get the best sound. And I can remember in '89, where our drum instructor was, he had you guys like this hitting the drum this way with the point of it. So I felt much better about this deal. And it took him forever to get everyone's sticks the right way. And I swear to God, it was up to 20 minutes. They were doing 8s and 8s. And finally he said, "Stop." And he goes, "Those are 8s and 8s. You will do these every day. And when we practice, blah, blah." And I'm looking at this thinking, I cannot stay in this room any longer. And you started 8s and 8s again. And I went next door, and for like an hour, that's all they did.
Where the moving company is, huh?
Oh.
This is where the moving company is?
Yeah, that's where it's coming.
And so that established finally everything brass needed to move forward. We had management. We had a way of generating money, which still is another whole story. And Gavin can tell, every year they changed the bingo laws on us. And every year we had to do something different. And that was the crowning accomplishment of that whole committee. One year Gavin got the license, another year I got the license. And first it was a 55-45. To this day, I can't tell you what that means. The next year they made it a 60-40 rule. And then we're like, whatever, but we would go to the meetings. I remember to go into '91, I went 2 months early because the way we worked it out, we owed our gambling account money. And
right. So in gaming, they authorized you to spend a certain amount of money on specific items, and then the rest you could spend how you wanted. And they kept on changing that percentage on what you had to earmark for specific authorized things and what was more of a general fund pool. Is that kind of close, Gavin?
Hey, thank you, Gavin. I mean, so you gave the thumbs up. So while we're trying to fix all the staff stuff, every year we had to address our finances. That's why in '91 the Corps was smaller. I mean, I had a reputation of saying no.
Was it smaller though?
Yes,
a little smaller.
Oh no, we went down to 40 horns. We had an exact.
No.
Yes, the Corps had 40 horns, and in '91, and Frank Lemire was number 40.
Frank Manier. I thought he was 50, but I could be wrong.
40.
I thought it was 41.
No, it was 40.
Right. So, okay, Roger.
It was, I believe it was 40 and that, and it was just crazy. I can remember Jim Duggan had a tape of this guy, and he goes, "Paul, listen to this guy. He wants to march and all that." And he's trying to get his school to fund it. And it was one of the few times I helped compose a letter. None of you have ever received a letter from me, have you? Great. I don't write. And we put this letter together, and I basically said that there's no university in the country right now that there's a program for someone to learn how to run a marching band program. And there wasn't. And I said, we're an adult educational group. And what we do is we run marching organizations. And that, you know, if Frank wanted to come, we would show him everything we knew about how to run it. He ran that by his school board and they agreed with that. So then I actually flew out and met Frank in Washington, in the state of Washington, for work, because that's all I did. And I remember talking to Rick Rucker, and he says, well, he's going to have to play the solos opposite Roger. And so I go out there, and Frank's just like, well, I go, no, this is your solo. He's going, well, you know, what is the horn instructor? I'm the choir director. I'm telling you right now, memorize this solo. And that, because you guys went back and forth. What was that song? Jazz Suite for Orchestra? Or?
Suite for Jazz Orchestra, yes.
Thank you. And so Frank didn't show up until the Memorial Day camp, if I remember correct. And I remember he went off with Roger, and they went off and played the stuff together. And I can remember it coming back. Roger has a smile on his face.
Greg was in the loop on that too, right? And
no, Greg didn't march in 91.
Oh,
Greg's last year was 90.
90.
Yeah.
And
let me just tell you a little bit about that. Yes, we went off. I mean, and I remember at the moment very well. We played a couple of the solos in Suite for Jazz Orchestra, and there's one where we do, and we both end together on a B below double C. Well, this was on a G instrument, but anyway,
still high.
We both ended on it together, and we were so in tune. We just looked at each other and fell in love, you know. Well, you know how that is, Greg.
So then they
yep,
came
just
back.
like me 4 years earlier, Roger, but I fell in love with you.
Yeah, well.
Blues in the night. Thank you very much. Because everyone was, and next you know, Frank came and there were 40 horns. I know we marched 40,
Must be a
but it
bromance.
turned into 41. And next thing you know, Rick starts up Jazz Suite, and everyone's playing. And next thing you know, those two dudes just let loose on their solos. When they put the horns down, everyone in the horn line was like, yeah. But that core was forced to be that size. And I had a heart-to-heart meeting with Gavin, and I couldn't argue his point. We did not have enough money to field another core of over 50 horns, because we knew at that time we could only go off of what this is 91. This was 90 going into 91, how much money we expected to make just on bingo because of the change. And during the 91 season, you know, I sat there and I got our license. Gavin made one of the coolest things ever did. We owed Lee Lines money, and Lee Lines was willing to have us pay them so they could take it off the books. And I believe they loaned it back to us so we could put it into our gambling account. And that way we actually made the 60-40 rule. And when we found, and everything worked out fine, because then Lee Lines could actually charge us some interest. And there was no other way of doing it. Gavin, and my hat's off to him to this day to have nailed that deal.
So one of the other, I'm sorry.
Well, and so then, it just so why, you know, we went smaller in that. And then as that year went on, I kept telling everyone, I'm going to tell you at Drum Beauty if we're going to DC or not. Well, all of a sudden I figured out that the Legion was not, or the VFW was no way were they going to be able to keep their pull tabs. And I had finally got us a pull tab license. I convinced them that my little 10-cent pull tab and 25-cent pull tab wouldn't affect theirs downstairs. Theirs was 50 cents, buck, two. They were big time pull tabbing. And they just, and so I waited, and next thing you know, the state tells them some ridiculous figure of money, like $56,000 they had to put back into their gambling fund. And it wasn't going to happen. And so, you know, and every meeting we would go over how we could take over the pull tabs. And we had everything lined up. We had our pull tab license. All I had to do was sign a contract to rent their space and all that. And up until the last day they had pull tabs, they weren't going to rent to us. And they go, we can get around this. They go, fine. Where are you going to make any money? And they didn't like me either. And then we signed the contract, and they missed one day of selling pull tabs. And from that point on, I knew we were done. Everything was in place. And that's it. We finally had secured the money of what we needed. The staff was in good shape. You know, we finally had all the sections. We're going to be moving forward. And I like to think of it as building a house. I was the guy that paid for the people to dig the hole to make the basement, which no one likes. And then, you know, you pour the footings and it rains and then you don't like the basement to begin with. Then you finally build the brick walls, you know, and then you finally pour the concrete. So now you can finally build the house. And the house is the creative part. And all of a sudden now you can go to the staff, what do you want? All right, how much money? This is what we think it'll cost. And the course started functioning on all cylinders.
Right, that's why I want to bring Scotty back in if he's here. And I see your comment, Ron. I do want to get back to that. When Scotty gets back, one of the other financial pieces that was beneficial to us and something Scotty wanted to share was his involvement in Drum Beauty, which was crucial for the Corps during that time, and established reputation and established a foundation for the Corps as an active player in the drum corps community.
And did that in 91.
And that's what really took us away from the drunken bungle years, or however you want to determine like Ron said, when he was around in the early 80s, and how that the culture was just not, he was not comfortable. And having that relationship that we built with Drum Beauty and established that relationship with DCI, and I'm kind of rambling here to get Scotty to come back. Hang on.
I can help you on that.
So when Scotty comes back, we want to touch on that. But Ron wanted to hear a little bit more on the Frank Manier 91. That was just such a special year, Roger.
That was me that wanted to hear about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So what else did you want to know about Frank?
I just wanted to hear about it from Roger's perspective, what it was like to have somebody of a professional level come in and join him.
Well, shoot, it was inspiration. It was inspirational for me.
We're scheduled to go as late as 4:30, so I don't.
I can't. I've got a gig. I've got an Easter Vigil gig.
That's fine. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I just wanted. There's something I just wrote. You may all see in chat. I don't want to take any more time. Why don't you can take a look at that. He participated in a lot of ensembles. One of them that I mentioned was a 10+ member ensemble, and he had everybody play solos, and he wrote solos that were specifically designed for each player. I wasn't in that ensemble. I played in something else, but we had more groups, I think, horn players anyway, participating in the individual and ensembles that year than any other year. And Frank really encouraged that. So he was a real mentor and teacher and inspirer to so many that year.
You guys actually won that year, and in 94 or whatever, I called Frank and asked him to arrange one for me for Bayou City Blues. And I told him I want you to play the solo in that. So we practiced this. It was called, and we called it, we both want to do Sinatra. He called the thing a tribute to Frank, but in my mind, it was a tribute to Frank Manier. And so we're practicing, and the people in Bayou have no idea who Frank is. And I kept saying, I got another lead soprano, he's gonna solo and all that. And we had it down pretty well, and they met him, it was at Scranton, if I remember right. And I remember brass, all these people from brass came by to hear us play. And we just took off, and Frank got done soloing, and I remember all these people from brass go, they're gonna win. And I actually, I played, which that handicapped that group, but
I remember, and your wife did too, didn't she?
No, my wife didn't play in that group.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, but I won a medal. Mike Pompquist played with it, so that another old director. But yeah, in 91, there was a lot of other things still going on. One of the problems was I was leaving. I wasn't running for corps director, But believe it or not, we started trying to take over Drum Beauty in '91. And
Hey, guys, I have to go. Can I mention one more thing about Frank?
Yes.
Remember, in the beginning, he had written to the Hawthorne Caballeros. He wanted to play with them.
That's
and
right.
They never responded. And as it worked out, it worked out perfectly because Seattle and Minneapolis were Northwest Airlines hubs. And so he could fly back and forth real easily. And then, of course, Sherry and Jim Duggan, they were newlyweds, but they opened their house to him. That's a whole other story, but a wonderful one.
Well, we all know the Cabs were assholes.
And one of their old director just died today, Frank Garris.
Frank Garris passed away yesterday.
Yeah.
I did want to, well, I don't want to end. I meant to begin the show with acknowledging the passing of former corps director and late great Rick Stevenson. So if we can do it for all you know for that.
Right.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Frank, who tragic passing when he passed away, just totally out of the blue. That was really frustrating. And there is a tribute that I had put together back when that happened with his 2 solo performances. You know, that second one with him and Corky, you know, pit stop, you know, playing cards. One's the cop, one's the crook, you know.
93.
That night, the Crime Fighter 2 year, yeah. 93, Crime Fighter 2. Yeah, that was incredible. I'm sad. I know Scotty had multiple commitments today. He really wanted to talk more about the Drum Beauty piece.
Scotty's getting ready to move, and that's why he made some reference earlier to, are you with the moving company?
Oh.
So he gave us a heads up that he would be in and out today. So he may be back, may not, I don't know.
I want to say thank you to a few people. Ron, if I remember correctly, in '89, you owned your own snare drum, correct?
Well, I bought a snare drum from you after '89.
Yeah, a Pearl and all that. I mean, I don't think...
Well, I remember talking to you about Pearls, and you wanted to go with Pearl because you liked the logo.
I know, I wanted to go with Pearl because we had other Pearl drums. And that we spend less money.
That's why he liked the logo, because it matched the other logos.
But there were so many things that changed to get the core to where it was, and it's just, they're horror stories in some ways. You know, I was told we could never march 50 horns, and one of the reasons was we didn't own 50 horns. Several members owned their own horns and all that, and I was bound and determined to have a 50-man horn line in '89. I found someone that had horns and I rented them to us to get the 52 horns. It was just, we didn't own any of our guard equipment. We didn't own any guard uniforms. We didn't own any of the rifles, the flags, any of that. We had to buy all that stuff back. What the Corps members went through in '89, '90, and '91 is no Corps should have had to gone through that. And, you know, I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I didn't know any other way to do it. And I don't think Gavin really had another answer for it either. Our best words that Gavin and I knew how to say to everyone was no.
Hey, Paul, you remember Hell Week?
Yeah, July.
Ooh. You remember Hell Week?
I loved Hell Week.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I wanted to go another week.
Well, you know, there are a couple things I came up with that people liked. I remember saying that the Corps would never do 3 weekends in a row. I also said that we announced what weekend we will definitely not perform that month. So if you had to do something with Mama at home, you knew the minute we had a Drum Corps Midwest thing, okay, you know, June 12th, that weekend, no Drum Corps, no matter what.
Right. As Gavin and I worked together then in the later '90s, and as we'll talk in the next show, we incorporated some of those scheduling things. I don't think we were really firm on the 3 weeks in a row thing, but we were very firm on the 1 weekend a month.
Right.
That we were focused and committed that whatever the schedule was, that if 3 things fell, you know, DeKalb and things fell on a week, then that is the default off weekend. We have to give families that weekend off. And I didn't realize that was something that you had brought in. So,
you know, and poor Cindy Bach, she was one of the few people who I called a friend. I met her years before. And I will admit the Corps' worst uniforms that they ever marched were mine, but they were paid for. All of them.
They're paid for, you're right. Yep. Doesn't matter. Yep.
I think we spent no more than like $250 for that whole uniform.
If even that.
Yeah, thanks. Cindy. But I had a meeting with Cindy and Ann Jones, and I had a pager back then. And I thought that, you know, and I treated them to a dinner. We were at some restaurant, and I guess I didn't say this. I said, well, I'm expecting a call, and if that happens, I'm going to leave. So Cindy has this beautiful presentation put together, and of what they would like the uniforms. They had swatches of the colors and all that stuff. And I'm looking at them, and then they came up with a price. And I looked at them and says, well, that's fine. What fundraiser are you going to run to produce that? And they're like, well, what do you mean? It says, there's no extra money. If you want to spend $8,000, you come up with a fundraiser, I'll back it. And when you get the $8,000, we'll get the uniforms. And then next thing you know, my pager went off and they didn't hear it. And I just got up from the table, walked over to a payphone because we didn't have cell phones back then, and called. When I came back, if they could have really had a knife, I would have been gored. And so I don't know if Cindy ever really knew that's what happened, but you know, and another person back then.
I don't think I did. Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing that Gavin and I, Skip Olson talked a lot about is we had to find another revenue stream that wasn't gambling related. And Kathy Meters comes up to me in '89 and she goes, Paul, would you be willing to work at the Metrodome? And I'm like, sure. You know, I had experience with that in Milwaukee, the Bucks games and all that, but I didn't really like it because down there you weren't guaranteed money. And all of a sudden, there's a bunch of people from the U that work there, and they go, no, you're guaranteed X amount of money no matter what. And it worked out to be like $21.80 in that. And so Leaders brought me the paperwork and I just signed the Corps up. Gavin took over and helped schedule all the Twins games. And the goal was to hopefully finally go to the football, which eventually happened. So now we're making money, or we have a chance to make money outside of Corps. So I'm in front of the board and I go, we're going to give everyone $22 in credit. And that didn't go over well. They go, they should at least get 25. I says, I'm not running a fundraiser we lose money on. I said, I'll give them 22. And if there's 18 people there, and I will pay the difference to get it to the $22. And you think what we put people through was just insane. It really was. And all of you who marched in, you have no idea how respectful I am of all you guys.
We kept coming back.
We straightened out so many things. And a lot of credit goes that stayed that way because of Gavin. You know, Gavin understood that stuff. I think Gavin right now still probably knows bingo and pull tab laws better than anyone in the state of Minnesota. I guarantee you, if he goes down there, he can quote it. I mean,
what year did we do the fundraiser at the circus over in St. Paul?
Oh, that started in like '88. You sold donuts, and Ann Jones did that.
Yes, mini donuts.
And
Wow.
then you did it.
Oh,
and we did it.
Going up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and then
man.
that's the Shriners did that. Is that where you got the idea from, the Shriners?
And then '89 we also did it because Ann said, "You want to can I sell these donuts again?" I says, "Are we making money on it? Go ahead and do it." But you know, you guys should look back at those years that you guys marched and be damn proud of what call it the way it was. It wasn't pretty.
This is the year I sold donuts for the Shriners. I still have the work shirt.
Oh.
You know, if Kathy Neters was the one that brought up the Metrodome idea for raising money, then
To
she
me,
gets credit for helping the corps financially, but recruiting, she brought in almost every single one of the U-Band people in the late 80s. Kathy Nieders.
Well, I got along. Kathy actually liked me. I think she never she never said something bad to my face.
She was such a sneaky little shit kid.
She talked me into joining the Corps, walking across campus in a snowstorm. We had done a hockey game at Mariucci, the old, and there was a snowstorm that hit, and I was a commuter from St. Paul. Like I lived in St. Paul, couldn't get my car out. So first, the deal was you help me dig my car out, I'll drive you home. And then the next deal was, okay, we'll leave your car here. We'll walk to her house on the other side of campus. And I spent the night there because I couldn't get home to St. Paul. And it was during that conversation in January that she talked me into coming out to a rehearsal and join the Corps. So it's her fault.
Yeah, Niedermeyer's a sneaky little shit.
Yeah, she's a sneaky little shit.
SLS, baby.
She talked, I mean, there was a snowball. There was, 87, Stephanie, you and Greg and Becky joined, 88, me and Dave Robinson and Terry Hausker, 89, Joel Anderson. I mean, it just kept snowballing. And it was
Joel, that's who I was thinking of. Joel, who did the spinning leg solo with Greg at the end of Suite for Jazz, wasn't it? When you were playing all the high notes at the end?
Well, that
Greg, wasn't it you and Joel and?
That was four of us. That was me, Joel, and Roger, and
Roger. Oh, Choppy. Sure. Choppy.
Yeah.
I got a U of M story for you guys if you want that I don't think most of you know happened. I don't know if you know this. I am an alum of the University of Minnesota.
Can we at least get to 96 and then you can start talking?
Well, that happened.
No, I can shed some light on the Drum Beauty too.
Well, I can shed a lot of light on Drum Beauty. We went after him in 1991.
Well, let me try here, right? You take a break.
Yeah, let's hear Gavin.
And,
I want to hear, what does Gavin have to say?
So yeah, we did go after him in 91. It was Dave Eckberg running it, and it didn't work out too well because Eckberg's a tough nut to crack, right? So the one thing that we would always do is, we're the local organization, so we wanted to perform at Drum Beauty every year, and he shit on us. He gave us like $500 to perform.
That was the best he did.
He knew we wanted to do it, right?
I'm glad
and then, he kept on doing it. And, we tried to partner with him. It didn't work. By then, Chafee was out of the picture. And in the meantime, Eckberg had problems with DCI. He, same old story. He didn't pay him, gave him a lot of money, and he needed to reach out for a partner. Tarbox probably knows some of this too. And we tried to partner with him. And I still remember the meeting. Of course, I'm a 25, 26-year-old kid. It was me, Scotty, and Eckberg going to meet and talk about this. And we brought in my dad because he's been around and obviously a savvy businessman and all that. We met for lunch down at that Holiday Inn in Rosedale. And we got to talk. And my dad just, after the conversation, Jeff just said, Dave, we don't need you. We can take this over without you. Here's the bullet points we need. Bop, bop, bop. You owe DCI this. They don't want you. And me and Scotty actually looked at each other. Did he just say that, right?
Yeah.
And Jeff was in there just for the meeting only. He didn't plan to jump in and help or anything else. I mean, Scotty was the one who took over Drum Beauty with Dave Eckberg. So Dave actually excused himself, went to the bathroom, came back and said, okay, let's talk about your plan now. Because he finally, I think, realized that he needed someone and we were it. Because DCI would not work with him anymore. And we were actually in good graces with DCI back then. I mean, we were a good organization, in the 92, 93, 94. Like Paul said, we were beating some DCI cores back then. Took over or partnered with Dave on Drum Beauty. So it was a 50-50 deal. So that was a very good generating revenue stream for us back then. Obviously since then, Drum Beauty took a different turn, but it was very good for us. So it landed in our lap and we took advantage of it. And again, a lot of that work goes back to Scotty too. Scotty had to work with Dave. Not an easy task.
Had to, keywords.
And, he represented Minnesota Brass. Even when Scotty left as director, he continued on that Drum Beauty stream for I don't know how long it lasts, 10, 15 years after that. But I mean, he was a good representative for us in that venture. And back to the Dome, I worked a lot of Dome events.
I was the shortest, I was the fastest.
And I always remember the you know, even though I did all the money thing most of the time and whatever, but I know Johnson was there a lot.
Need a lot of hot dogs, man.
I did my share. Booth did his
Some
share.
of the funnest times were doing that beer port with Scott Johnson, right?
Yeah. We were talking about the beer port earlier. I'm going, hey, if they called me to work, I go, they got a beer port? Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
that was the one you want.
I get the beer port, I'm in.
And that's back in the days too, where you don't have a you know, cash register or whatever. You got to do the things in your head. Beer
Right.
ports, $5 a beer, right? Okay, you
Right.
want 4, $20, right?
And peanuts. So no hot dogs, no brats, no, no nothing.
I liked working the Dome. I thought that was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was a good deal, actually. I mean, for the people who, you know, were married and didn't have kids, and actually it was a good get
Good
together.
fundraiser.
Yeah.
It turned out to be really good.
Right.
One thing I learned working at the Dome was at the next game, don't buy a brat during the first quarter.
Right, right. I learned that too.
Popcorn.
Or
put
popcorn for that
Yeah,
matter.
that's right. Well, popcorn is probably 4 games old.
That was awful.
So the only other thing that I really wanted to touch on this, I mean, a few other things, we're running out of time, was the change in the program of the Corps and how drum corps in general, and Minnesota Brass specifically, where you started seeing a show theme, you know, for years, all the way through the 80s. You know, you had your off the line, you had your opener, you had your production number, you had your cut, you know what I mean? And it was 92, 93 when we did the Crime Fighter. That was like the beginning of a more thematic, creative movement. And I don't think that was just brass. I think other corps started doing that. I mean, Madison did a Alice in Wonderland show back in the 70s. But it wasn't until the 90s where corps started to really do themes, you know. So 92, 93 was Crime Fighters.
Memphis Belle, 94.
94 was Memphis Belle. 95 was the Caribbean Vacation Show. 96 wasn't really a theme other than our 50th anniversary. And that show, that closer that Rick Ruckert wrote with what, 21, 22 songs in it that just blended and melded into just a work of art, you know. And that was towards the end, I think, of his career with the Corps. Was 97 his last year?
Yes. Yeah, because
You know,
98 was when Rob Mueller and I worked with the Horn Line. Rick actually marched in 98 after stepping away from instructing for how many ever years it was.
Right, because how's he going to walk away from a Tower of Power show? I mean, come
Well,
on.
exactly. I remember him asking me if I would feel awkward if he marched in the Corps, and I'm like, well, the hell no, come on down, you know.
Yeah. And we're going to start the next episode with the late 90s and the growth of the competitive nature of the Corps. So, you know, through the mid 80s and into the mid to late 90s, we saw the growth and the financial stability thanks to people like Paul and Gavin and other key factors, and Scotty from the creative aspect. But 98, 99 was really when we put ourselves on the drum corps map, especially 91 with that Earth, Wind and Fire year and beating the Caballeros. I mean, that was when we were on the map. We were on the radar. We were pissing off people for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons.
Well, and it kind of showed that 98, when we finished 5th, wasn't a fluke, because we came back and went up a spot the next year.
Right, 8/10 out of second. That's all I ever say. 8/10 out of second place. We might have taken 4th, but we were 8/10 out of second place.
You know,
So do you mind if I take just a couple of minutes and talk about Drumline Perspective in the 80s?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I definitely do, because that's just the perspective. I definitely wanted Paul to talk about that transition that you were curious about that made us more of a credible drumline with Chris Thompson coming on board?
I mean, first of all, I see many people here that I met back in 1980, and I'm still their friends, and that means an awful lot to me. But in 1981, which was my first full year with the Corps, the drumline was kind of in disarray. I mean, we were doing the best that we could with the talent that we had, but there was not a focus on the drumline. The horn line was the thing. And so when I put my drum in the Corps truck, and I don't know if you remember this big monstrous cube van that we had at that time. I think Roger had the graphics on that. I put my drum away at Northfield, and the equipment manager, and I'm not going to mention his name, said something that really pissed me off. And I said, I'm done with this Corps. And so for a few years, you know, I kept up with, you know, my friends that I'd met in 80 and 81, and I knew Minnesota Brass was doing okay. And then in about 87, I saw, hey, wait a minute, something's happening here with the drum line. Because I'd go and watch you know, like at Drum Beauty. And that was probably due to the influx of the Richfield crowd. And in 89, I ended up going to a rehearsal, and I can't remember where it was, but Joel Matuzak put a pair of drumsticks in my hand and said, why don't you drum with us for a while? And it felt good. It felt like something was happening in this drum line. And it was kind of the level that would have satisfied me, whereas in 80, it didn't really satisfy me. And so because of Joel, I came down and I marched that year. Also in 89, I want to credit Chafee and Gavin, because I knew right from the start that we had professional management. So Paul, I want to tell you that wearing that black armband was one of the proudest moments of my life. So I'm glad you stuck to those guns. And I knew that with Gavin, you were doing your best to try and make, you know, correct the financial problems that the Corps had incurred. So it was at that point that I knew this is something that's worth my time. So I'm going to end it at that. I mean, when we get into the 90s, I can talk to you about 96, which is my favorite year that I participated.
Let's talk.
Well, I guess I just want to say that you all have been very, very important in my life. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come back in 96 and have what I consider the best year in my, I mean, basically, I never marched Junior Corps, and that was the closest that I ever got. And that means an awful lot to me.
Was that your last year on the field?
I'll tell you more about the 90s during the next thing, because I'll be there. But I just want to let you all know how important you all are to my life. And I met my wife through Minnesota Brass.
What was your last year on the field, Ron?
I'm sorry?
What was your last year on the field?
I came back to do bass drum in, help me.
2000? Yeah, 2000. We both joined.
Yeah, 2000, and I did 2001 and 2002. And the reason I came back in 2000 is because it wasn't 99 years of fire year.
2000 was Chicago.
Chicago. Okay, well,
we marched that year, but it was the Tower of Power year and the Earth
98
and Fire year.
Yep.
Right, 98 was Tower of Power, 99 was Earth, Wind, and Fire,
So
2000 was Chicago, and then 01 was the Bond year. And that's going to be our transition. Just like this show, we talked a little about the late 70s, but worked into the 80s and 90s. We're going to start with the late 90s on the next episode because those just became the come out of nowhere years for us, and then work our way into the championship window.
I have a suggestion for you guys.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate those comments. That's why we see these couples. That's why we see these couples in these videos.
Even beyond that, Minnesota Brass is a class organization. And I saw that transition in '89 when I came back. And it probably started before that. But again, Paul and Gavin, Chris Thompson had a function in that. But I mean, it was the management that had the foresight to do what they had to do and invest in, not only the full core, but in the drumline. So thank you for that. And thanks for making us wear those black armbands.
One thing
Oh,
before
my sister.
One thing I did before we came here is I dug out a bunch of pictures from brass at DCA and all that. And the transition after 91 is so amazing compared to where we were. You look at the 90s and every show, uniforms were a little different. They look well made. The guard, everything was there. The other thing with the drumline is we finally, in the 90s, the drumline progressed to have a front ensemble. 89, we had 3 different people borrowing pit equipment from bands, and when it broke, we got stuck fixing it. I mean, we had no front ensemble. In 92, you guys, everything was there. And you managed it well, and you kept growing. And you look at, the different pictures, and you look at it, you look like a professional group. And your shows were unique every year. And I can't say that for what I gave you guys in 89, 90, 91. We looked like a broke core.
I think Paul's forgetting the uniform from 98 to 2001.
Oh, the black and blue sequins?
The potato sacks, yes.
Hey, that was my favorite uniform.
It was the most comfortable uniform I ever wore in my time.
It was no parts.
Hey, I guarantee you, I give you a pair of black pants that we wore in 90. You have to provide your own white shirt and a blue thing with a little silver bee that we cut
blue
out.
Sash with a silver bee.
Stuck it on there. You will change your mind.
All right. Had to wear driver's caps.
I remember those.
This has been incredibly awesome. I
You
know
had to
some
pull
of
your
us.
own stripe on your pants.
Thanks, Kevin. I know some of us have other commitments here later. It's Easter weekend, and we certainly are excited that you guys took the time to show up. Paul, I learned from you, and Gavin. I've learned from Gavin since I first met him back in the late '80s, and I've already talked to Gavin, inviting him as one of our guests for the next show. So I'm hoping that he can make arrangements for that. And we're going to talk about the last third of our core and how we went from becoming a perennial finalist, dabbling in that bottom 10 to winning a title. And I always call it that bucket list item that you just can't control. And I was able to cross that off. And I'll be eternally grateful for the drum corps for that.
Paul, what'd you do to your arm?
Tried to break it? How's that for an answer?
I was going to say, that's why you're here today, right? Because I was going to ask you, did you get the weekend off? Is this your
No.
The wife's in Colorado.
Yeah, but everyone in my family's in Colorado but me because I couldn't take a drive that long. I was delivering mail and I attempted to try to fall down about 4 frozen concrete steps onto a concrete cement. And I realized that wasn't a smart thing. And as I'm falling, I grabbed the rail and literally yanked myself up, and I tore a tendon off. I did a slap tear. I wrecked my rotator cuff again. And when they went in to fix it, they said I had arthritis, and I got to let them chisel and then grind that off and suck it out of there. And so that's since January 8th.
You're getting old, bastard.
All right.
Yeah, I am getting old.
Well,
Sounds fun.
Who's going to do the closing? Is Jim going to do the closing, or is Cindy going to do our closing?
Go ahead,
Cindy. I'll do the closing.
We can talk after the closing.
Absolutely.
We're gonna do a hard 4:30 to make it officially over, and then we can still visit afterwards.
So the organization applied for a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, and the program that was put together included a couple academies, what we're calling. This is the History Academy. It's designed to get us together, talking, thinking, remembering, and getting through the COVID-19 pandemic season with good emotional health and stability that's formed by remembering the great times that we had together. So my closing is we have 2 other academies trying to launch a social academy. And then we also just launched the Education Academy if anybody is interested in free lessons. That information can be found on our website. Please stay tuned. We will be meeting again in May, the first weekend in May. I'll look for a link to come out on that. And finally, we want to thank you for attending this and say that the activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. It's part of our grant that we make sure we give credit for the state for this venue. So thank you for attending. Great memories, and I'll turn it over back to Paul and Jim and Kurt to carry on conversations as you would enjoy. And I enjoy this very much. Thank you.